Good morning to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Tuesday, January 16th, 2018. I got it wrong last week and said 2017, but I am confident that 2018 is correct. All right, so here we go. Let's take a look at the long paddock site. Check on the SOI. Look at that, the daily contributor, 17.11. The 30-day is going back up. It was down there at like minus 6.3, if memory serves, from last time. And so the 90-day is still positive. And as long as this stays positive, the 30-day will continue to go up. And the 90-day average, that long-term average there, really the 3-month average, that's what I watch the most. And as long as it is on the positive side of zero, then we really don't have much of a chance at all of an El Nino taking shape. And that's what we use this to watch. This is my predictor, because this predicts the future. When you look at the SOI, what it's doing today tells you what's going to happen down the road. That's a whole story for another day as to why that is. But when these numbers are positive, we're not going to see an El Nino, and that's pretty much the way it is. It's probably 95% accurate to look at it in that light. So 17.11 for today, that's pretty respectable. And the La Nina still sort of doing its thing in the tropical Pacific here. Let's use red to highlight this, or orange. Very cold anomalies compared to normal here at the sea surface temperatures. This La Nina holding strong at basically in the Nino 3 area, which is about out in here somewhere. The latest number is almost negative 1 degree Celsius. I think it's like negative 0.90 from the different buoys and the observation system that they have out here to monitor El Nino, Southern Oscillation Phenomenon, that's what it's called. And so close to negative 1, which is a pretty healthy La Nina. And the rest of the Pacific, this is interesting right in here. If this holds, which you never know, right? It's just January, mid-January. But if this holds and the Atlantic's warmer than normal, when you cool this area off, this is very similar in geographic location, at least latitude-wise, to the main development region in the Atlantic. See that? How they correlate very well with each other? And so this is sort of your MDR of the Eastern Pacific. And if it's cooler than normal and you have less activity in the Pacific, well, we saw what happened last year. There was not much activity in the Pacific as a whole, and the Atlantic dominated. Speaking of the Atlantic, look at this right off the coast of the Carolinas and of really the Northwest Atlantic as a whole, way, way, way above normal, above average, normal average, whichever way you want to look at it. And then the North Atlantic, too, just unbelievably warm compared to especially the South Atlantic. And that is a very favorable signal. So we just need to see if this holds. So far it is. So, every week. And then as the months go by and we get closer to May and June and those seasonal forecasts start to come out that really hold more merit than December and April forecasts. Those are kind of preliminary looks. I guess you could call them sort of keys to the game. But then your May and June updates, I think, have a little bit more substance to them, because we're right there at the precipice of the hurricane season. But then you can really look at these things and say, okay, if it's this way now, it's probably not going to change. But between January and August, it certainly could. But this is what it looks like today. This is what the subsurface anomaly pattern looks like. Cold here in the Eastern Pacific and very warm here in the subsurface of the Western Pacific. And it's interesting that you've got these positive anomalies here showing up, half to 1 degree Celsius above normal, even warmer than that over here. But, and let me just change this to a different color here, we'll use black. But the main thing to notice too is look how deep this subsurface warmth resides. We're talking, there's 100 meters deep right there. There's 200 meters deep, so we're getting down to 250 meters deep here. It's not making any headway up towards the surface like this. Why? Well, that goes back to the SOI over here, with the SOI not being driven negative by a change in the pressure pattern. We are not seeing strong westerly winds coming across, helping to downwell that water and then let it surface elsewhere. In other words, the trade winds are strong enough this way, which is the way they're supposed to be, so that any of that subsurface warmth that's way down deep over here is not allowed to come to the surface. It's staying mixed. The conveyor belt, so to speak, in the Pacific is doing its thing, and that is you typically have your water moving from east to west over here, then you have downwelling over here, and it comes over here and cools, and then it upwells back over this way, and the cycle continues and continues. But when you have a very negative SOI, your air pressures are lower over here and higher over here in the western Pacific, and then the net flow of air is this way, and you stop this upwelling over here, and then this water is able to mix to the surface, and boom, you get an El Nino. And we are not seeing that as of yet. So let's see what happens over the next 30 to 60 days, and if there are any changes to that. Another interesting way to look at it, this is from Dr. Michael Ventris from the WSI Corporation, the weather company, and he notes here that a fairly significant trade surge over the Pacific, and the easiest way to interpret this, all of these blues and purples here that you see on this timeline, these are your latitude and longitude areas, so to speak. So there's your longitude lines there, and then you move, so it's north to south and then east to west. Basically, these blues and purples are trade surges where the trade winds are strong, and then the reds are where the trade winds are lighter or even reversing. And you see another interesting part of this, no real strong trade surges over the tropical Atlantic. There haven't been any to speak of. Okay, the strongest trade surges have been here in the Pacific Ocean, and it's hard to explain this, and it took me a while to figure out, like, what in the world are we looking at? But anytime you see these blues and purples here showing up in the Pacific, that's a trade surge. And as long as we don't see that over here on this side, I mean, look, there's 45 degrees west longitude, so that would be out in the middle of the tropical Atlantic, and then 90 degrees west, that's New Orleans longitude, and so this encompasses a good deal of the Atlantic basin through here, and you don't see much of this blue or purple. All right, so that means that there's not much of a trade surge blowing across the surface of the ocean, mixing it up and cooling it off. Does that make sense? I hope so. So we look at this as well. All right, so the tropics, from the hurricane season aspect of this particular update, everything seems to be status quo. The Atlantic still very much warmer than it should be. The La Nina continues in the Pacific. My guess is that this will eventually moderate to more neutral conditions. The Atlantic will stay warmer than average overall, and we will probably see a very busy hurricane season once again. You say probably because you never know. There are things that you don't see coming that show up, and it can screw things up. Just like in sports, you have a loaded football team, a loaded baseball team, basketball team, whatever. You're expected to do very well, but then somebody twists an ankle, they break a wrist or whatever, and all bets are off. Sports and hurricanes, it works, trust me. All right, looking at the lower 48 weather, what a mess we've got going on east of the Rockies today. Wind chill advisories all through here. Yuck, very, very, very cold, dangerously cold. Winter storm warnings, even for Metro Houston. Are you kidding me? 50 inches of rain from Harvey, and now winter storm warnings. Wow. It's to say that the weather has been dynamic lately is an understatement. So yeah, lots and lots of problems here in the east as the Arctic air spilling out of Canada again, mixing with this moisture and storm system in the lower 48, specifically sinking into the Mississippi River Valley and then stretching out the frontal boundary from Texas and into Mexico, really, all the way up into Nova Scotia, if you want to be specific about it. And it's going to be a real problem. Flash freezing of some of this snowfall. In other words, you get an inch, 2 inches of snow, not really a big problem overall, but it hits the pavement, it's in the 20s, and cars are driving over it, it gets compacted and it freezes, and it's no longer snow, it's like a glacier, a thin layer of ice and compacted snow, and it's very, very dangerous. Atlanta, Birmingham, Raleigh, Durham, 2014, you remember that? I don't remember when the one in Birmingham, Alabama was, but it was that, just epic traffic snafu from just a little bit of snowfall, and we're worried about that happening again today. So some of these advisories extending into the Carolinas. Nothing quite yet down in my neck of the woods in the Wilmington area, but that might change, and I'll show you why I think that in a minute. What's the culprit? Well, the culprit to all of this, first, is the Arctic air. This is our GOES 16 imagery. Wow, look at that. That's just incredible. Anyhow, the Arctic air coming down this way. I mean, you can almost see it even on this particular satellite image. You can see the cold air. That's amazing. And then here's your frontal boundary here. And so you've got the moisture sort of mixing up very well with the Arctic air. And as such, you're going to have all sorts of problems. Now, luckily, I guess on one hand, luckily, it's not a major, like we're not having another one of those bomb storms, as they called it, winding up here off the coast, delivering coastal surge and, 20 inches of snow or whatever. So instead of having sort of a concentrated area over the I-95 corridor, we're spreading it out over thousands of miles. So I guess pick your poison, right? But really, be very, very careful. This is a neat image. You can see the cities outlined on this as the nighttime imagery fades into daytime. This is a snapshot. That's Atlanta. There's your Charlotte area. This is the triad, the triangle. And there's even little Wilmington sticking out there. And then you've got, of course, Houston sitting over here. There's New Orleans in vicinity, Baton Rouge, the Birmingham area. Montgomery's farther to the south. Lots and lots of places around here, western Tennessee. Yeah, you get the idea. Be extremely careful out there. If you can avoid travel, avoid it. Seriously. This is dangerous. It's not like a pretty snowstorm. This could really have some problems with it. And then behind this cold front will be the very, very cold air and wind chill advisories in effect, because this is dangerously cold weather. As I'll show you, pattern's going to change at least. So this is what the map looks like basically right now, and this is what you look at if you take the satellite picture and turn it into sort of a model interpretation. A mix of freezing rain, sleet, snow, whatever. That'll change over enough here towards the Houston metro area. And man, 4 million plus people with frozen precipitation, no thank you. Arctic high pressure, 1051 millibar high, sinking out of Canada. Very dense air spilling out like molasses, slowly oozing and spreading its way down into the lower 48, mixing with this frontal system. Well, there you go. This is what it looks like now. We move out into time. This is 24 hours. This is valid Wednesday morning. And then finally, I think it's every 6 hours. I did this at 30 hours. Probably going to have more precip down here than the GFS is showing. At least that's what I think. And then you get it into the Piedmont of the Carolinas, maybe parts of the upstate of South Carolina and beyond. And then, of course, up here into southern New England. You're used to snow and ice up there, I guess. And then finally, in terms of my neck of the woods, at 36 hours tomorrow afternoon, GFS depicting some moderate snow here for portions of the Sandhills and the Piedmont. And even into South Carolina, away from the coast, obviously. And then it mixes over. If you go back in and look here, this is 18Z, 1 o'clock tomorrow, so finally 6 o'clock tomorrow, or 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. Snow in Wilmington, New Bern up to Washington, Greenville, Roanoke Rapids, Rocky Mount. Probably light snow in the southeast part of the state to heavier snow. An inch or two, maybe 3 inches, wouldn't surprise me. Everything seems to have been overachieving as of the last year. The hurricanes certainly did, so why not the snowstorms? So keep that in mind. Tomorrow evening, overnight tomorrow night into Thursday, Could be snowy. We'll see. And then finally that moves out by a morning rush. I would suspect that some of these school systems here in my neck of the woods are going to have some delays or closings. We'll have to wait and see. And then finally this stuff moves out. This is 72 hours. Chilly, Arctic high pressure settled just north of New Orleans. 96 hours, things start to shift. See that high pressure? It went from here. Let's get this going over to there, and it slides offshore. Your return flow comes around, and yay, things start to warm up. A true, much better thaw. I mean, look at that right there. The high pressure is anchored offshore over here, and then you can just follow these isobars and the way the wind direction comes. Whew, making progress there. Some good southerly flow as a storm system starts to come in to the west where you need it. You need the snowpack, you need the moisture, and then another weak little storm system up in Kansas. You know what? When you start to see these right here in, let's say, later into March and April, yeah, that could be interesting. We'll talk about that later. And we'll go from there. Severe weather season not far away. So that's a look at the tropics. Again, the La Nina holding on, no changes there. Lower 48 weather, very busy and dynamic. Be careful out there. I don't want to see you on social media as being part of a 46 pile of cars jumbled together in a crash on the interstate somewhere. Please stay home if you can. And if you have to travel, be extremely careful, because you know what? It's nice to have you watching these videos. And speaking of that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and you get notifications when a video is posted. And that's it. I am done. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter as well, at HurricaneTrack. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com, my website, of course. Thanks for tuning in as always. I'll be back with more for you next week.